Thanks for joining, everyone. Welcome to Hazardous Waste Discovery Show and Tell number 5. This is actually our last show and tell of the discovery. More on that later and where things might go next. But yeah, this will be the last one of the 12-week discovery, which is very exciting. So next slide, please, Thomas. No real change here, but worth mentioning that I have added, as promised, and I should have done it last time, Ellie Davis and Jack Rose at the bottom there from the helping with the core collaborators side. Everyone's been super busy on this project throughout, but our team onion as it's set up has been perfect with regards to getting the input from all of the sort of key players. So, somebody, I'm just getting some background noise from anybody, if they could go on mute. Right, next slide, please, Thomas.
Yeah, we got a question, I think, from
okay.
Bob Scott.
Oh, sorry, no, I put my hand up by accident.
Oh, okay, no problem.
That's all right. Preemptive question. Yeah, quick run through on problem that we're looking at. I've added a rugby theme. Bear with me on this one. I think there's a big rugby match happening this weekend, so I'll try not to mention it. Anyway, I foresaw as a big problem, probably playing New Zealand. Our problem is unchanged from this whole discovery, and we put it in front and center of all of our show and tells. So that's here again. Our goal here, I understand this was a really important try from 1999 against England. But our goal, again, for discovery has been unchanged, to understand the end-to-end journey for our users and identify the areas where we can make it much simpler and easier. Next slide. Something big happened in 2005 here, I think, that the Welsh team was celebrating at. So what have we been doing besides celebrating, coming to the end? So this is an old slide, actually, but when we did start back in November, I thought it'd be useful just to really play what we promised we'd do at the start, just to sort of line up with where we are now. So right at the beginning, back in 2021, November, these were what we outlined as regards to expectations for discovery. So not going to have all the answers or a detailed spec or a solution, any sort of detailed timeline or any sort of costings around it. But what we can promise is a committed, empowered team, better understanding of users, honest assessment of what's hard, an understanding of the prize, size of the prize or not, and a list of hypotheses to test, and a clearer ask for people. So if you go to the next slide, please, Thomas. We, in the last 12 weeks, have become a committed, empowered team, fired up about the problem. Again, I said this at the start, it's been really working so well with the core team, collaborative team, and collaborators outside of it, that our drive towards reaching our goal has been brilliant. As you've heard throughout these sessions, if you've been with us, we have done lots of external, internal user research, certainly have been on target for what we set ourselves, for us to be able to get great insight. We do have a better understanding of users and their needs. It doesn't end here, obviously, there's more to do, but Discovery has helped set things up for us. With Adam, our interaction designer, you'll have seen that we've mapped out our user journeys, certainly for small and medium-sized business, which has really helped understand, again, a different flavor with our users. Thomas himself has been immersed in lots and lots and lots of data from the website Customer Hub, which has helped shape a picture for where things are with discovery. And because of all this, we've got a good list of hypotheses that can be tested in alpha. So worth just reiterating what we said we were going to do and where we are now, which has helped. And you'll get a flavor of this from this session today as well, of what we've learned. Next slide, please. So we'll just go over what we have been doing in the last 2 weeks, and generally over discovery. I'm going to hand over to Adam.
Thanks, Pete. So we've continued work developing the user journey maps, and part of this challenge is part of this process is that we highlight knowledge gaps, so things that the team who are working on this don't know and aren't aware of, or even knowledge gaps that maybe the organization as a whole have. And one of those has led us to having a conversation with the Customer Hub team, and Owen from the Customer Hub team very kindly took us through the registration processes online for waste producers, hazardous waste producers, I should say, and waste carriers, brokers and dealers, which was a really useful meeting, as Owen had both the knowledge of what those screen flows are like, but also where certain users are calling up Customer Hub to get help and advice, and when they're generally getting stuck. So I just wanted to share some of the kind of things that myself as a user-centered or human-centered designer noticed that felt worth sharing with everyone. So yeah, first on the hazardous waste producer registration. Move on to my slides, my notes to make sure I share everything correctly here. Users want a quick way to register which gives them confidence. So one of the things that was mentioned is that sometimes maybe a hazardous waste producer has forgot to renew, or maybe they don't know they need to register. This is the first time they're handling hazardous waste, and the carrier might have been called or arranged to come and pick up that waste, and there could be a scenario where they're literally standing there with the carrier who's just told them they need to register. So there is a need for quick registration in some instances. And the confidence is that they need to feel confident that they've done this correctly, and they're going to receive their premises code quite quickly, because that's the thing that they need and want to hand over to a carrier. So Owen was explaining that sometimes people are willing to phone and speak to the Customer Hub and actually pay extra to register over the phone, because they need to have it quickly and to feel confident of that result is worth the extra money to them. So this, to me, looks like a good opportunity. If the online process is in a single registration, quite a quick process, this should be highlighted. One thing to note there is that the only timescale at the moment that is mentioned is 15 days that it could take to receive an outcome. That does cover bulk registrations as well as simple single ones. So there's opportunity there to give users who are doing simple journeys more confidence. So then moving on to the waste carrier broker dealer registration, there is a risk that we potentially noticed, and that is currently, as someone going through that registration process, you are able to select lower tier and then go on to register as a lower tier broker or dealer. And from my understanding, that is not a legitimate status to hold. This also leads to the form not presenting information on, or asking the user to provide information on convictions, and it also means that they're not asked to pay. So both of those brokers and dealers, from my understanding, needs to be upper tier, and they do need to pay. And there's also, I guess, another question why people who click lower tier aren't also being asked to present conviction information. We also noted that users must go through a complex account setup process. So once they've signed up and given their email and their name, Owen was taking us through the different steps they need to do to add a service, assign it to a business, make sure their details are correct. All these extra things that the Customer Hub team have to do before the user can actually register as a carrier broker dealer, which is what they are there to do. And there's quite a few steps to jump through to get there. And then finally, just kind of an open question, what's the benefit to this user group to have an account? From my understanding, the interactions that a carrier, an upper tier carrier broker dealer will have is to renew every 3 years. So there's little interactions that I'm aware of that they're going to have over a 3-year period, and that's from experience in past account setups. There's a high chance that people are going to need to recover their passwords when they come back, because it's, you know, they've not used it for 3 years, so they've forgotten what their username and password is. And then for lower tier, they never need to renew. They register once and that's it. So this is an open question, really. If there's people out there with some opinions and information on the value that this may have, it would be great to share with us. Yeah, that's all from me. I'm going to hand over to Graham on the user research. Thank you.
I was muted. I apologise. I wonder if we could go to the next slide. Thanks, Thomas. We've discovered in all our conversations with users and Natural Resources Wales subject matter experts and others, a lot, an immense amount. And one of the problems you have is organising that information to make sure that it gets embedded in the right way to the processes and the learning and the usability of this information in future Natural Resources Wales products. And so this is one of the fields in which we've arrayed our user data. So I'll take you through just a couple of examples. I'm not going to walk through all of this. Just to illustrate the chain that's been happening about how we've used user data and how it's become sort of knowledge that we're happy to recommend things on. So for example, on the top line, I've called it process-related user experiences. There are lots of processes that have names that are well established, that lots of people recognize. Even if you don't understand exemptions, you know you're part of them if you have an exemption. So we've kept some of that language to help people bring it to sort of life in future projects. I think that kind of hybrid between a process, which is how NRW see it, and an experience, which is where we're sort of drawing our user stories to paint it as, sort of come together in this sort of category. So for example, a need might be, as a member of an admin team, I need to know how to review registrations so that if the colleague who usually does this work is away, we don't fall into any kind of jeopardy about not being registered. And so that's one of many, many different kind of needs that have been expressed by users, to speak just of registration. And it's fed into, you know, the internal sort of stories we've been listening to that in relation to that are about where the various databases Natural Resources Wales are and how some are siloed and at the moment, and projects to join them up are progressing. So we've had a sort of picture of that. And it's gone into, that for example would contribute to many different parts of the hypotheses that we've been generating, but one in particular around having a joined up digital experience about something that may be called an account, or that may be a series of connections that the user can have with the organization that it doesn't at the moment. On the next line, we've got Nrw Structures. NRW has incorporated or built various systems to be able to administer all the complexities of the HazWaste system. And so one of the problematic ones you can see, I suppose I should say about these structures, some of them we've discovered are very helpful and keep things moving and working, and some of them present sort of active barriers. One of those is waste codes, the kind of hazardous waste classification codes, which are codes that you assign to a particular category of waste, and that helps track and see that waste has been treated properly as it moves through the system. So we might get a user saying, as a health and safety manager, I need to know I've classified my HazWaste properly, so I will pass my audit. And what we've learned is that there's a great deal of variance about the interpretation of waste codes, and they don't seem like they're going away anywhere soon. And is there a possibility in our hypothesis around validation and registers to help people see that they have or haven't got the right waste codes in their returns and other processes, for example. The next category is regulated user types. Certain types of use are written into the legislation. This isn't all of them by any means. Consignees, consignors, lots of others. But if, for example, we looked at the need of a receiver who sort of has that as part of their identity and all their responsibilities as a receiver sort of in their mind or in the mind of the organization. He might say, as a receiver, I need to know that I can check the carrier I use is legitimate, so I can make sure my systems run smoothly and compliantly. There's lots of users have had lots of questions around the reliability and transparency of the sort of carrier part of the market, full of lots of small operators, people in vans, skips, and the sort of less visible end of the market. So that's sort of how we've delivered some of the information, and that's fed into hypotheses around user knowledge and clear trip-ups in the user experience. So I just thought I'd share that to show that we've come up with systems to describe what we've heard, what problems it causes or might address, and how we might move forward with that information. So that's just a little snapshot, really. I know next up we've got something in a little bit more detail from James, who's going to tell us about the Welsh language research that was part of the UR.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Yeah, so we did a couple of interviews in Welsh. They weren't particularly to dig into the kind of linguistic aspects of it. It was more the user choice. They responded to our invitation in Welsh, so we recognised their language choice with that. As part of the interview, though, we asked at the end, do people use which side of the website do people tend to use? And got a couple of quotes here. So I'll read it in Welsh and in English. Dwi'n edrych ar y Saesneg ma arna I ofyn am bod chi'n delio mewn permit a bob dim yn Saesneg I ddechrau. Termau technegol dyn ni 'di arfer efo oherwydd y maes gwastraff dyn ni'n gweithio yn erioed wedi bod yn yr iaith Saesneg. Ac mae'n anodd mynd yn ôl a gwybod beth yw'r cyfieithiad a deud y gwir. Dwi tipyn bach yn ddiog fy hun, yn trio mynd at yr ateb yn sydyn, a dwi'n aml yn ei ffindio un haws mynd yn ar ôl y geiriau technegol yn Saesneg. Just flip to the English. So what he's saying there is, I look at the English, I'm afraid, because you're dealing with permits and everything is in English to begin with. But used to the technical terms, it's always been in English. It's hard going back and knowing what the translation is. I'm a bit lazy myself, trying to get the answer quickly, and I often find it's easier to look up the technical wording in English. And we've got a second quote. If you could just forward. Dwi'n meddwl yn bod ni wedi arfer hefyd o pan oeddwn ni'n gweithio efo consultants ni. Oeddwn ni'n Saesneg I gyd hefyd. Wedyn mae rhywun yn mynd i'r drefn. Dwi dal yn neud tipyn o waith efo nhw ac mae pob dim trwy Saesneg. So pethau mwy technegol fel petai, dwi'n delio efo pobl ella mwy Saesneg beth bynnag ac mae'n cymryd dwyeth yr amser I ddarllen pethau yn Gymraeg nag yn Saesneg. So if we translate, I think we've become used to it, that is English terminology, from when we worked more with our consultants. They were all English. Then you get into a habit. I still do a bit of work with them and everything is through English. So with more technical things, I deal with people who are perhaps more likely to be English speakers anyway, and it takes twice as long to read things in Welsh as in English. So if we could just flip on, got a few insights to do with that. Oh, okay. No worries. I've got it on a Word document. Don't worry.
Just in the notes.
Yes.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so a couple of insights into those quotes. But both interviewees were fluent Welsh speakers. They lived in Welsh-speaking areas, so we can probably assume from that they do a lot of things in their life in Welsh, many domains, family, friends, probably some aspects of their business. However, their go-to technical terminology for waste is in English. And what this kind of reveals is they interact with a largely monoglot English waste system. For instance, consultants waste companies based over the border in England, that kind of thing. So they have a very limited opportunity to acquire the Welsh terminology within that waste system. So in a normal business environment, they're not coming across people who are using the Welsh terms for things like waste consignment notes and standard industry codes. Because of that, it's a barrier if they want to use our Welsh language web pages, because we know just our general knowledge about websites, user research about how people use them. People are typically scanning web pages, they're not reading it like a book. And people are typically skeptical, impatient, task focused when they're in a digital environment. So we can see that in the quote, "I'm a bit lazy myself, trying to get the answer quickly." Well, he wasn't actually lazy. He's just, he's just reflecting how people typically behave on a website. They're scanning for headings, they're scanning bullet points, they're looking for things to click on. And these kind of unfamiliar technical terms slow down this process. As we saw in the quote, it takes twice as long to read things in Welsh than in English, because the people are having to kind of translate these technical terms that they've only ever known in English into our sort of translated versions of them, and it's creating it's friction, it's slowing it down. So they were the insights we got in those interviews, and it accords with a lot of what we know about other products, how people use the Welsh sides of websites, and just how people interact with websites in general. So it all kind of feeds into the mix with that. Thanks.
Great, thank you, James.
Thanks, James.
And now it's my time to shine and talk about the findings. So these are our kind of, there's nothing here is totally final, but we're very close to the end of the discovery. So they're, 90% or more kind of things we are fairly sure about. So we want to give you, our intention is to do a wider kind of end of discovery presentation to say these are all the things we've found and these are recommendations in a bit more detail, but we felt like we should probably give at least a flavor of what it's going to be and a summary, just so that, otherwise you're going to ask questions about it. I'm going to talk about it in Q&A anyway. So some things we've learned in the discovery, kind of high level headline things. Content is a big blocker on the website. Users struggle to know what to do based on reading the website. They end up going to the customer hub, they end up phoning, they end up hiring consultants. We know lots of the information is scattered around different places. It's organized from the NRW's point of view rather than user's point of view trying to do a thing. There's also issues with accessibility on the website and bilingualism. We know it's not just that the waste system and process tends to be in English, it's also lots of the forms and applications on the website are only in English and not in Welsh. So there's lots of barriers there and lots of potential for improvement, which is a positive spin on it. We know that the returns process is quite inefficient. The good news was we found that users were not bothered by it. It was not a major pain point for them, but it did present a lot of pain for NRW. And also the part of the reason the users weren't too bothered about it, and this is hazardous waste returns rather than waste returns, was that they only have to do it once every 3 months, which isn't too often. But it could take them up to 2 weeks sometimes for some of the larger companies to bring all the data together, and the spreadsheet could be a pain. So we know there's some things that we can improve around there. Registration was a frustration. There's a little bit of rhyming we want to do in there. We found that users tend to re-register rather than renew because they can't find themselves in the register or they've forgotten their account details. They are very clear about having registered, and sometimes they have more than one registration. There could be a carrier and a producer, or a carrier and a permit holder. They don't know that if the NRW has a single view of them as a multi-person thing, a multitask person rather than 3 separate people, because they might be a farmer who has things unrelated to waste interaction with NRW, and then also they're a waste producer or a waste carrier or a permit holder or an exemption holder. There's also issues around lack of reminders leading to registrations expiring when they don't want them to, or users having to renew early because they don't know when they have to renew, and things around the actual process of registering that Adam highlighted earlier. So there's lots of things to be done there as well. One interesting one that we found as well was that data is wasted. We have loads and loads of data in Nrw. We have analytics on the website. We have analytics on the portals and the registration portals, but then it links up. There's also lots of data in the customer hub about people, phoning up because they can't get through the registration journey or they're having trouble with something. But we don't seem to be using that data to make improvements about about the website, to say, oh, hang on, those people are having a problem in this bit. Let's look into that and see if we can fix it. So there's a pool of potential useful resource there in the data that could be used. And yeah, so one of the things we also want to find out was what potential is there to do something about it. And the good news is we have found that there is lots of places where we could do alphas or do other things. So one of the main ones that we think we're going to look at is exemptions. I'll talk a little bit about that in the next couple of slides. So these are the kind of potential future directions we think for us as a CDPS team working with Nrw. We've also got some other secondary recommendations which we think we're not necessarily best place to do right now, or aren't the highest priority things or highest value things, but could be done alongside us by another team, or we could do later on, depending on whatever is decided. So what we think the next step might look like: design a service which guides users through the task they want to complete. So this is about taking a user-centered approach to designing a service. So it's a task-based approach that the user wants to do, rather than things that Nrw thinks the users need to know at different points. And we think exemptions is a really good candidate for this, for prototyping some ideas, prototyping the new user-centered approach. We found that it's a major area where content is a blocker, and that's a big theme across lots of different areas in hazardous waste. And also that they struggle to know where to start in the process. They struggle to know if they might be eligible for an exemption, or should they go for a permit, or like where to begin that process. So we can see real potential for like a decision tree type prototype, or something that might help users get to the right place in existing content. So we think that's going to be a really good area to focus on. We also are aware that we could potentially have quite a big impact on the returns process, even though the users themselves don't express a huge amount of pain in it. We know it's a big pain for Nrw, and also because of the way it's done and because of the time it takes Nrw to fix the problems with the returns, we're not using the data that the returns are giving us to their full potential, because we're spending time fixing the spreadsheets. So what we want to do is we want to spend a bit more time digging down into, we know there are problems with the macros in the spreadsheets. We want to spend a bit of time identifying exactly what those problems are so that they can be fixed. And then also we think that there's potentially lots of things that can be done to improve the service, the whole returns kind of process. But we think the impact of that, the kind of user benefit and the benefit to Nrw, will be limited compared to the effort involved in actually doing that full scale. But we think it's a really good place for us to start to show how it could be done and how things can be different, and start to go, oh, actually, we can think of things in a different way. We can come up with new ideas. So we want to spend one sprint, in addition to the sprint identifying the issues with the macros and the spreadsheet itself, prototyping a kind of very, very low fidelity mock-up of what different alpha ideas could look like for returns, to kind of help spur on ideas within the organization. And that will kind of work as a dry run for then, okay, now when we do it on exemptions, we're going to have a bit more skill, have a bit more idea of what alpha might look like, what that kind of behavior is. So yeah. And then other recommendations that we have, and these are ones where they're not necessarily lower kind of value, but they're ones where they might be require lots more effort than we can provide, or might be other people a better place to provide, or beyond hazardous waste as well. So ensuring users that accessibility needs can use the website, that's a big one. We think that, you know, Nrw as a public body have a responsibility, a legal responsibility, to make sure that their website meets certain guidelines. I think it's WCAG 2.1 at AA standard. Google that if you like.
So just quickly on that, Tom.
Yes.
Because we did a lot of work on that last year. Our website currently does meet that standard.
So it's things like PDFs that don't necessarily meet that standard, and it's mainly external things that we've found that aren't necessarily very accessible. And then generally it's the beyond just the legal kind of responsibility, it's also the kind of the way the content is written is quite jargony sometimes, and for people with, you know, who are in a stressful situation, if they're busy or they've got low reading ability, it can be very, very difficult to figure out what's going on. So for them, we find that potentially we're excluding people from the hazardous waste system because of those kind of barriers. So yeah, you're right that generally speaking, the website, the kind of usability of the website seems, I haven't done a full audit on it, but having done a brief look, it does look like that it's accessible in terms of you can use it as a if you're using a screen reader or something, but the forms and the Word documents aren't necessarily up to the same standards. That's something that we think should be looked at. It's not something that we kind of spent a huge amount of time and looked at in detail, but it's something that did come up a few times and in user research as well. So yeah, that's something that we think should be looked at, but not necessarily by us. And then similar to that, making sure that everything is also available in Welsh, and our provision is equivalent in Welsh as it is to English. Lots of the forms and stuff and external documents are not in Welsh. Also, lots of the guidance links out to gov.uk, which isn't, and is kind of the guidance, the regulations might be equivalent in England and Wales, but the gov.uk kind of guidance says this is for England only and isn't necessarily always also available in Welsh. So that's something that needs to be looked at as well. Content generally came up again and again and again as a barrier to users. Lots of jargon and technical language, some of which is necessary because it can be quite complicated things, but there's definitely things that can be done to improve that, and kind of writing and structuring content from the user's point of view rather than the organization's point of view could go a long way towards that. Good news is Nrw has some brilliant content designers that we've been fortunate to work with in this discovery. So the expertise is there. So it's just a matter of helping them and focusing out them on the places that are going to be most useful for users. I think there's a lack of joined upness, I guess, is my attempt at not using jargon that in terms of like content in different pages. Users don't necessarily know. They sometimes have to go to several different pages or several different PDFs. We called it the 17 PDFs of doom, I think we referred to in a previous show and tell, where, you know, trying to apply for one permit or something required you to look at 17 different PDFs to figure out which one was the right one for you. So it's that sort of thing that could really use improving. Conscious of time, so I'll just quickly talk about the other things as well. Registration process, like Adam talked about earlier, there's issues there. You know, users should not be able to renew registrations on behalf of other people. They would like to get reminders to renew. There's questions about whether for some of the registration journeys they need to set up an account, especially if they're not going to have a further interaction with that account with Nrw, or if they're only doing it every 3 years because they're likely to forget their password. And then also on public registers, there was issues that came up in user research. People couldn't find companies or people that they were looking for on public register, even though they knew they were there, including sometimes themselves. They would go, oh, hang on, when's my expiry? When's my renewal due? I'll look up myself in the public register to find it, and it's not there. I can't find myself, so they end up registering again, leads to duplicates, all host of problems at the back end for us that we have to sort out. So yeah, lots of issues there as well. And then the data, you have so much data. It was great to see, you know, I got massive spreadsheets worth of Customer Hub data and analytics data, Google Analytics and Azure App Insights. But there's lots of potential there for using that better to help make decisions. So that's a recommendation as well. So yeah, that's kind of what's coming up for us. We've got 3 and a bit days left, so we finish on Friday. So the rest of the week we'll be finishing up our final kind of written report and synthesizing our findings to kind of make the link between what we've done, what we found, what we think is happening on our recommendations much clearer. That's kind of our aim. And we've got a session tomorrow with a few of the bigwigs, Katrin and Helen, and I think Rob and a few other people, and I think some CDPS people to kind of discuss what's happening in the next phase. So that is us. Same dog again this week. We didn't get a new dog picture, unfortunately. But yes,
it is a new dog actually.
Is
for
it?
the show and tell audience? This is Ellie's, Ellie Davis's dog, Sunny, as promised, added to our final deck.
Yes. But for those of you at the Digital Governance Board last week, this is the same dog.
Right.
Questions,
Hopefully
please.
time for questions. Yes. I know if anyone is thinking, we've had some good questions around the bilingual aspects. So I don't know if there's any more that needs to be covered there. There's a hand gone up from, is it Catherine?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Hi, I'm a bit of an interloper here, so I've been invited along. I'm from England. I'm the product owner for the hazardous waste build of the waste tracking service, and I'm really interested in the work that's been done in the discovery. And I'm just, maybe this is a completely innocent question, but I'm just wondering how we can kind of work some of the findings from this discovery into what we're doing, you know. And I'm really interested, like the Welsh speaking and the accessibility and all of those things, but any other things moving forward, how we kind of meld this together. I mean, I'm just not sure where everything fits together. Thank you.
Do you want to get that one, Thomas, or me? Or?
You go ahead.
Yeah, no. So thanks for the question, Catherine. We have been in touch with, or been speaking a few times with John Jones,
yeah,
and Femi, who I think has recently joined. So we've been in constant contact with them, and also Lindsay, as regards to us starting way back 12 weeks ago, what our plans, what our focus is, and then looping in with actually John, I think last week, John and Femi, to give sort of early stuff that you're hearing now, really, around our findings and what we've picked up, with the promise of catching up again for our next phase. So I can make sure that happens ASAP when we're sort of back. But definitely that's a keenness for us to be certainly sharing what we've got. But up to this point, hopefully we have been doing. I think I'm not sure if John and Femi have shared much outside of the conversations we've had.
That's what I was wondering, because I didn't want to sort of say anything too much, but I thought it's worth asking the question. And obviously I talk to Femi and John all the time, and I think, you know, there's some really useful things to think about and make sure that we kind of push them forward into the main waste tracking service. So yeah, thank you for that, and I'll try and keep in the loop, because it's interesting for me to feed in as well. Yeah,
no, but thanks for joining, and definitely we can keep talking.
Thank you. I don't know how to put my hand down now, so just bear with me.
Just
I've got
come up with more questions. Any more questions from anyone? Michelle.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I don't know how to phrase this, and it may have been asked in previous sessions, but I came in a bit late and there was a discussion there sort of reflecting on how to classify waste and making that easier for customers and more accessible for them to understand. And I'm just wondering if there is that broader appreciation around actually the responsibilities of the operator on classifying their own waste and them telling us what it is, but also it is an area that is open to widespread abuse, and therefore misclassification is often something that facilitates waste crime. It's in people's interest to perhaps code waste incorrectly. So whilst we're talking about making more information available and making it easier to people to do, I guess it's a question of does the project have an appreciation that waste is handled by people where it's not in their interest to correctly code it and do the right thing with it?
Yeah, definitely. I think our clear steer at the beginning of the project was stay away from waste classification. So it's not something that we deliberately sought out to find things out about. But it is something that came up quite regularly in our user research sessions. So the things that we kind of were hearing were, producers being frustrated with, waste receivers being frustrated with waste producers for misclassifying the waste, and then actually sometimes they would actually fine them, and there was a self-policing going on because they'd received waste that had been misclassified. But also just generally, even for the people that, at least to us, appeared to be very law-abiding, trying to do things correctly, they would struggle to say, well, is it this thing or is it this thing? And being unclear under the guidance how to correctly classify it, but trying their best to, but getting it wrong. And we also heard anecdotally of, even within NRW, different kind of waste officers having different opinions on what waste should be classified as. So it was that was the kind of finding what we wanted to draw out, I think, was just, it's really tricky. I don't know, Graham, if you've got more to add on that.
Not much more, Thomas. I think you've covered it super well. But I think the awareness in a sort of complicated system that people know they're in, of having confidence that they've done something, that they've got the right thing, a kind of validation, is a big thing as well. And so for all the points Thomas mentioned, that's a hard thing for them to come by. Until they send it further down the chain and they're fined, or somebody, reports somebody else. It might not, there might be other ways which don't sort of essentially change any classification systems, but sort of flag things up that might make it a better user experience, I think.
Does that answer
Does that
your
help?
questions?
Yeah, does that help?
Yeah, I think it's that distinction between a good user experience and what you're lawfully required to do.
Yeah, I think we're not recommending changes to any regulations or actually the classifications themselves, more just how do we help people understand better, I guess, and how to give them that confidence that if you do the right thing, you're going to be fine.
Thanks for the question. We have just slipped over time, so if there aren't any more questions, there was one question that did come in from email. Rob Stone here, if you're still on, not ignoring you, got the question around understanding the macros issue. If we're speaking tomorrow, make sure that we'll give the information you need on that one, because we don't have it to hand just yet. But just registering, we got your question.
That's fine, Peter. Thank you.
That's all right. Great. Thank you so much for joining again. Hopefully we'll be back with you soon with the next phase of this project. But until then, speak soon.
If you do have any other questions, this is Alex's email, so you can email him. He's on leave this week, so
yeah, don't expect an immediate response, but we'll be back in touch.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
You can always tweet us.
Have a good rest of the day and week.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Thank you.